Cradled in a cloud of fable, Tibet, the land of snows, was a place unknown to the world beyond its mountain walls for nearly a millennium. Exotic tales abounded of this unearthly people on the vast plateau embraced by the Himalayan mountains. But it was not a land to be entered abruptly by outsiders. Inaccessible and remote, Tibet remained a mysterious figment in Western imagination. When the first expeditions of Westerners entered the Forbidden Land in the late 19th century, they brought back the first images the outside world had ever seen. They were images that provoked the fantastic tales even more. It seemed Westerners wanted to believe in the mythical Shangri-La, a temperate Asian land sheltered from the outside, governed by a philosophy of compassion and nonviolence, free from hardship or strife. If similar in philosophy, the physical reality of Tibet was far more complex. Life on Earth's highest plateau was one of harsh contrast, a place where natural riches were matched by unimaginable rigors. Its first inhabitants were nomads who slowly adapted to high-altitude extremities. Even for these rugged people, at 15,000 feet, their eyes could literally dry up from the brittle intensity of the sun. A sudden hailstorm could destroy a season's work or scatter herds in seconds. Their early history was marked by fierce wars among tribes and outsiders. Life expectancy was brief. They were a people with an acute sense of life's impermanence and suffering. It is not hard to understand why the Tibetans, whose outward conditions were so severe and changeable, came to look inward for a sense of permanence and peace. The king who had finally united them as a people wished to unite them in faith as well. He invited a charismatic leader from India, Padmasambhava, to bring Buddhism to his land. Tibetans had believed in a host of deities, both benevolent and wrathful. Overcoming sabotage from the leaders of this religion, known as Bon, was the challenge. Padmasambhava succeeded by blending these beliefs with the teachings of the Dharma, or Buddhist scriptures. Instead of casting the deities out, he creatively recast them as guardians and symbols of the Buddha's teaching. The result was a unique Himalayan hybrid of Buddhism. The lavish rituals and imagery of their former faith remained on the exterior, but the teachings of Buddhism slowly claimed the minds of the Tibetans. They came to embrace the Buddhist view of life as a continual stream of death and reincarnation, a cycle in which human birth represents a precious opportunity to make the moral choices that will determine one's destiny in the next life. Reincarnation in a lower realm of existence, into another human life, or ultimately into nirvana, a state of freedom from the suffering of physical existence.
Compassion stirred the Buddha to send his monks out into the community. Sworn to chastity and poverty, they wandered the roads, bringing the Buddha's teachings into the world. Go forth, monks, for the happiness of the many, out of compassion for the world. There are beings whose eyes have little dust on them, who will perish if they do not hear the teaching. But if they hear the teaching, they will gain liberation.
The monks exist by begging. We think of begging as kind of a bad thing. Begging in this tradition is a good thing. It's a sign of spiritual purity.
You're not allowed to beg tomorrow's lunch today. Only today's lunch. Then you can't eat from noon until dawn the next day. Then you have to go out and get another lunch. And then in exchange for lunch, you give a lecture. Unless they say we don't want to hear about it, then you don't. But that's the only thing but that forces you to interact with the lay community.
And if you're not serving them, if you're not doing something useful for them, they won't put anything in your bowl, and that will be the end of your community.
The Buddha himself wandered across northeast India, teaching and gathering new disciples everywhere he went. You didn't have to become a monk or a nun to become a Buddhist. The Buddha's teachings were for everyone.
Everything is burning. What is burning? The eyes are burning. Everything seen by the eyes is burning. The ears are burning. What is burning? Everything heard by the ears is burning. The nose is burning. Smells are ablaze. The tongue is burning. Tastes are ablaze. The body is burning. The mind is burning.
We're on fire. We may not know it, but we're on fire, and we have to put that fire out. We're burning with desire, right? We're burning with craving. Everything about us is out of control.
The Buddha goes on to talk about the three poisons: greed, and anger, and ignorance, and how the three poisons are what is making the fire. And the way out of doing this is not to deny the three poisons, but to recognize that if you turn them round, you come to their opposites. Instead of greed, you have generosity. Instead of anger, you have compassion. And instead of ignorance, you have wisdom.
I can give my teachings in brief, the Buddha said. I can teach in detail. It is those who understand that are hard to find.
There are stories of people coming to the Buddha and saying, I am leaving your teaching because you have not told me about whether there is a life after death or whether there is another world. And the Buddha says, did I ever say that I would give you the answer to these things? No, Lord, you didn't. Why do you think that I never said that I would give you the answer to these things? Because these are not the things that you need to know. The thing that you need to know is how to deal with suffering. Because at this very moment, what made you ask that question was suffering.
The Buddha was, above all, a pragmatist. He did not expect his followers to agree with everything he said. He encouraged them to debate and argue, to challenge him.
Buddhists say, my follower should not accept my teaching out of devotion, but rather your own experiment. Even Buddha himself, in order to get final enlightenment, need hard work. So investigate based on reason, through logical investigation. If something contradicts in the Buddha's own word, then we have the right to reject that.
As the Buddha gathered more and more followers, stories spread of his miracles, which mixed the marvelous with the mundane.
One story tells how 500 pieces of firewood split at the Buddha's command. In another, a mad elephant charged wildly down a street, forcing everyone to flee. Only the Buddha remained, quietly waiting. The elephant, overcome by the Buddha's radiant kindness, knelt before him, and the Buddha patted his leathery trunk.
What is the meaning of miracle? Miracle is something unexpected. I think 100 years ago, jumbo jets or some of these really computers or these, I think in their eye, this is something miracle. Because miracle is something cannot understand. So now, I think within this century, we may find some new ideas or new facts. So far, we spend all our energy and time for research on matter, not internal world. This skull, small space, but a lot of mysterious things still there.
The great field of knowledge is as tiny as the Earth is in the universe. I mean, it's a speck. And the universe is what we don't know, and it will always be that way. However much we find out, it will still be that way, because the unknown is vastly, it's unspeakably greater than anything we will ever know.
In one of the most storied miracles, the Buddha strode on a jeweled walkway suspended in midair, while streams of water spouted and flames flashed from his body, shooting out to the very edge of the universe. And as the Buddha sat on a lotus flower giving his teachings, he replicated himself, filling the sky with multitudes of Buddhas for all to see and wonder.
Do we believe that literally? Does it matter whether we believe it literally? What many of those miraculous stories are about is the sheer wonder of it all. The very fact that the whole of unknown time and space has led to this very moment when we're sitting here talking to, when we are sitting here talking to each other, is utterly miraculous.
Sitting here in a room, having had a cup of coffee, having taken it out of a beautiful blue and white porcelain mug, what could be more miraculous than that? Everyday life around us is already so implausible and so glorious that what need for further miracles? And that's the teaching of the Buddha. That's the miraculous teaching of the Buddha.
Violence, the Buddha taught, always leads to more violence. To the slayer comes a slayer. To the conqueror comes a conqueror. He who plunders is plundered in turn. War was endemic in the Buddha's age, ravaging northeast India again and again. Although kings and their ministers sought his counsel, the Buddha offered no grand political vision. He was powerless to stop the killing and the fighting. Even the men, women, and children of his former kingdom were massacred by a marauding king, forced into pits and trampled by elephants. it was said that the Buddha received the news in silence.
Hundreds of them killed. So that day, Buddha was sad. Buddha's a human being. So he acts like a human being. So sometimes he also, they fail. He failed to perform miracle.
The Buddha failed, but we as the Buddha fail constantly. And part of our suffering is our failure, our recognition of our failure.
Buddhism doesn't argue with reality. There will always be both the potential for awakening in any moment and the potential for incredible damage at any moment. And if we fool ourselves into thinking we're past that, we will do incredible damage.
Change, the Buddha said, must come from within.
The Buddha starts always with the mind and talks about the violence in the mind and says that violence in the world is a result of violence in the mind.
A tree lives on its roots. If you change the root, you change the tree. Culture lives in human beings. If you change the human heart, the culture will follow.
For decades, the Buddha shared his teachings all across northeastern India. Let all beings be happy, he taught, weak or strong, great or small. Let us cherish all creatures as a mother her only child. Barefoot in his robes, he was still walking the roads when he was 80, but old age was upon him. His back hurt, his stomach was often in pain. I am old, worn out, he told a trusted disciple, like a dilapidated cart held together with thin straps. The world is so sweet, he said, that he could understand wanting to live for at least another century. But he was frail and exhausted. He became ill near Kushinagara, a remote village near the border of Nepal, when he was offered a meal which would prove deadly. The food was spoiled.
He ate what was offered to him, and it's said that he knew it was bad, but he took it anyway because it was offered and didn't want the person who offered it to feel bad because it was his time.
Today, Kushinagara is revered by pilgrims as the place where the Buddha finally left the world. It was in Kushinagara where he grew weak and asked to be laid on his side in a quiet grove of sal trees. As he neared the end, his disciples began to weep, stricken with grief. But the Buddha reassured them. All things change, he said. Whatever is born is subject to decay.
He's saying this is a natural process. He tells his disciples, use this time, use the energy here, even this, for your own awakening. So he used even his own death and their sadness as a time to remind them of what their real task was. What he's actually doing is inviting those who are close to him into the experience. I don't think the Buddha's teaching in any way argues against grief or sadness or loss.
The teachings, if they make any sense, have to make sense in ordinary circumstances, in ordinary lives. And in ordinary lives, we grieve when we lose. We grieve. When it hurts, we say, ouch. Buddhism is trying to look at things the way they are, the way it is, just as it is. It hurts. This is life. This is our life. And our relation to life involves losing it, too. You don't get beyond these things. You don't get beyond them.
It's all right to feel what human beings feel. And we are not supposed to turn into rocks or trees when we practice Buddhism. Buddhas laugh, cry, dance, feel ecstasy, probably even feel despair. It is how we know the world. It is how we live inside of our hearts and not dissociated from them.
The Buddha had always been saying goodbye. Now he prepared to leave the earth forever. He would never be reborn, never die again. It may be that after I'm gone, the Buddha told his disciples, that some of you will think, now we have no teacher. But that is not how you should see it. Let the Dharma and the discipline that I have taught you be your teacher. All individual things pass away. Strive on, untiringly. These were the Buddha's last words.
The Buddha died peacefully. His head was pointed to the north, his face to the west. The stories tell how the earth shook, and the trees suddenly burst into bloom. Their petals falling gently on his still body, falling out of reverence. Divine coral flowers and divine sandalwood powders fell from above on the Buddha's body, out of reverence.
His disciples were quite upset. What are we going to do without our teacher? We will be lost without our teacher. But his instruction was so simple and so clear. I am not your light. I am not your authority. You've been with me a long time now. Be your own light.
The Buddha saw death and life as inseparable. These are two sides of the same thing. Death is always with us. Death is part of the whole large unknown. And if we are unable to smile at the idea of the unknown, we're in real trouble. That's the realism that the Buddha was talking about, trying to come to terms with reality.
When he was 29 and still Prince Siddhartha, the Buddha had left his wife, child, and family to try and understand the nature of suffering. had attained enlightenment, shared what he had learned, and left a path for others to follow. Now he was gone. But before he died, he had asked his followers to remember him by making pilgrimage to the place of his death, to where he gave his first teachings, where he achieved enlightenment, and where he was born.
Those 4 places.
Because it lies in a politically sensitive area, foreigners were forbidden to visit there until 1974. As a result, the culture of Ladakh is still relatively unchanged. Every New Year's, the people of Leh, the principal city of Ladakh, make a pilgrimage in which they offer prostrations, an ancient Buddhist practice. By making prostrations to the Buddha, his teachings, and the community of his followers, they pray that all who suffer in this world may find refuge in abiding peace. According to the Buddhist teachings, Buddhahood, or unchanging wakefulness, is at the heart of every living being. This basic awareness is the essence of life. It is beyond birth and death, but to be born leads inevitably to the sufferings of sickness, old age, and death. Compassion for everything that lives is the basis of a path through this life and to our death. The belief in reincarnation is an expression of that compassion. Buddhism was brought to Tibet in the Himalayas 1,300 years ago by the great Indian saint Padmasambhava. It was he who wrote the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is a guide for the dying. It describes the process of dying as a natural transition. The text explains how, by recognizing the mental states and physical sufferings involved, we can come into contact with our own essential nature. In this way, it is possible to find freedom from confusion and fear. In a small village near the headwaters of the Indus River, an old man, Palden Tsering, has died. The women of the family have gathered in the kitchen where they improvise laments to his memory. Whenever he would smile at me, I was never so happy. Now that he's gone, I have never been so miserable. The family has requested Chozan, a Nakpa, or Buddhist yogi, and a resident of the village who often performs these rites, to come and read the text and to make the appropriate offerings. When someone dies, the Bardo Total, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, is read every day for 49 days. According to this text, the consciousness of the dead person lingers between one life and another for a period of 49 days. During that time, he is capable of hearing, so the text is read aloud to encourage and guide him. At first, the text is read in the presence of the body. Kept carefully wrapped, this text, like most traditional Tibetan books, consists of unbound pages held between two boards and has been printed from hand-carved wood blocks. O son of noble family, that which is called death has now arrived. Now, for the benefit of all beings, recognize the luminosity which dawns before you. This great blazing mass of light is enlightenment itself. It is the natural mind. It is the essence of your own mind. Recognition and liberation are simultaneous. The Book of the Dead describes how at death the consciousness is suddenly separated from all the circumstances which made up daily life. Mind experiences its own liberation directly as radiant, pure white light. Both life and death, according to the Bardo Total, are a continuous flow of uncertain transitions called bardos. In the bardos of death, if mind does not recognize its own nature, it becomes ever more solid until it enters a new form of life. O son of noble family, now is the time for you to seek a path. You are not alone in leaving this world. Everyone who has come before you has died. You can no longer stay here. Now you should think like this. Now I will abandon clinging to this body and to this world. I will go forward. I will abandon fear and terror. And I will recognize whatever appears as a projection of my own mind. Chozan uses an old astrological calendar to fix the day of Palden Tsering's cremation, making calculations based on the dates of the dead man's birth and death. He determines that the cremation should take place 10 days later. It shows here that Palden Tsering may have been a wild pig in his past life, and that he may be a bird in his next one. But perhaps if he takes the Bardo Total to heart, he will return to the human realm. At the beginning of this century, W.Y. Evans Wentz, an American who studied anthropology at Oxford, became interested in reincarnation. He traveled to India where he found a copy of the Bardo Total and sponsored the translation from Tibetan and edited the text into English. It was he who titled it the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The renowned Swiss psychologist Carl Jung wrote that he had found in this book his life's partner who had revealed the secrets of the soul. The Living Dying Project in San Francisco has been assisting terminally ill patients for more than 20 years. The project's aim is to help dying people find meaning in the transition between life and death.
The project was created because the metaphors, the storyline that existed in our culture for dying in which death was seen as a failure and the enemy and an error of the universe somehow. And therefore, the hospital intensive care ward was the ultimate inner chamber of the temple about life. And the whole fear that surrounded the process of doctors seeing death as a failure, for example, we felt there was the need for another metaphorical system.
So please begin by picturing in front of you your client or some other person you know who is suffering right now. And feel in an open and direct way how this person actually is suffering. Feel the quality of it.
The Dying Project was created in order to create an environment in which people that were deep in philosophical materialism could explore another metaphor for life and thus for death. And the people we found most willing to do that were people that were themselves facing death.
What do you think is going to happen when you die?
This hospice serves people who are expected to die within 6 months.
Most people don't talk about death, you know.
Would you like to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah. You want to tell me what you know?
Well, you know, I would, and I obviously haven't died myself lately.
No.
But let me give you what I know, and maybe it'll be useful. Consciousness leaves the body, and consciousness experiences a feeling of integrity and wholeness and safeness, and then it's attracted toward what is universally described as a very beautiful, incredibly beautiful, clear, bright light. It's never described as a beautiful sound or beautiful smell, but this very beautiful light. The reason this light is so beautiful is that this light is your true nature.
Oh, that would be very nice. That's fascinating. So you've actually been there with people, and they've come back and told you?
From near-death experiences, and there are people in certain traditions, like for instance in Tibetan Buddhism, who are trained to go into that after-death state with people and guide them. There are actual guidebooks to help people go through this journey, if you will.
Tokuden Rinpoche is an abbot from the monastery at Ladakh. He is making this visit in order to bless the people of the village, to teach, and to see how they are faring. Tokuden Rinpoche is also giving teachings on Poa. This is a method unique to the Tibetan Buddhist tradition for assisting the consciousness to release its attachment to the physical body at the time of death. This is Stanjin. He is 96 years old and has lived according to the Buddhist path for all his adult life. He has a deep interest in these teachings. First, visualize the form of the Buddha of boundless light, Amateus, above your head. Let your consciousness rise upward through your abdomen, upward through your body, up through your neck, and finally out the top of your head. Dissolve there into the light around you. In this way, you may enter directly the pure realm of light. The uncertainties of the bardo will not affect you. While in the village, Tokuden Rinpoche also goes to do the Poa ceremony for Palden Tsering. He makes offerings of barley and butter and anoints Palden Tsering's head. Palden Tsering, you have died. The light of this world is fading completely, and the light of the next world has not yet appeared. Your body has lost all feeling. This is what death is. Let yourself go. With more offerings of barley and butter, he invokes the blessings of all the Buddhas and all the awakened ones. The blood on the head gives an indication that the ceremony has gone well. If there is some sign that the dead man's consciousness has left the body from a place on the head, then that's a good thing. It means that the consciousness has not been obstructed as it left the body completely. Offerings are left out to encourage Palden Tsering. Be nourished by our offerings, Palden Tsering. Every day, Stanjin offers 100 prostrations with these words: I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. By praying in this way, Stanjin invokes the wisdom of the Buddha, his teachings, and the community of his followers to help all beings find liberation from suffering. He feels he has accomplished all that he can in this lifetime. He has lived to see his family secure and well, and his last wish now is to die soon. Are you afraid of death? No, everyone must die someday. Everyone is born with the weight of death on their shoulders. I haven't done anything bad, so I'm not afraid to die. What happens after death? Above are human beings. Below is hell. It's our destiny to die. Why aren't you afraid? Because we'll be reborn. This child is the reincarnation of someone. Everyone is reincarnated. What was this child's previous life? That I don't know. Even though the physical body dies, consciousness continues. It is a constant repetition of life and death. That's why people are reborn. Stanjin was born at the end of the last century. It was all he could do just to survive the harsh winters. As a child, he had no blanket, so he slept covered in loose chicken feathers. For food, he caught wild birds and animals in the mountain. The only money in his village came from the sale of handicrafts to the caravans which traveled to China. Some of my life was very hard, but I have always practiced the Buddha's teachings. When I say the mantra with this prayer wheel, it is to express my wish that all beings in the lower realms, the animals and hungry ghosts, beings in hell, all find liberation. No matter what happens now, for myself, I have no regrets.
One of the things they wanted me to do today, and let me ask you if this is something that seems appropriate to you, was to read a little bit of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which traditionally is read to people so they can become familiar with these ideas. Okay. Listen to what I am saying, Bruce. Death has now come and you are departing from this world, but you are not the only one, as death comes to all people on earth. Be willing to release any connections with the life you have been living and release the people with whom you have associated. Whatever fear or terror that might come to you during the experiencing of the reality of your mind, keep these thoughts in your consciousness and go forward. Recognize that any mental image, pictures which occur are of your own creation. Maintain that recognition and you will achieve liberation.
"9 days have passed since Palden Sering's death. According to the Bardo total, if the deceased has still failed to recognize his own basic nature, and if he has failed to recognize the peaceful deities as projections of his own mind, then they transform into terrifying wrathful ones. Palden Tsering listen without distraction. Now, the blood-drinking, wrathful ones will appear. Their bodies are dark red or dark blue, with 3 heads, 6 arms, and 4 legs spread wide apart. Their 9 eyes gaze into yours with a furious expression. They hold human skulls full of blood, and they roar like thunder. They are accompanied by a retinue of their own kind in many colors, and they fill the whole of space. Do not be afraid. Do not be confused. Recognize them as the projections of your own mind. Do not be afraid, for they are your innate wakefulness. If you recognize this, you will be liberated. Recognition and liberation are simultaneous. Today is the day of Palden Tsering's cremation. Monks have been chanting in the house with the body since early morning. Cremations in Ladakh are performed as fire offerings. In order that he may no longer cling to his former body, and so that his relatives and loved ones may release him from the bonds of their attachment to him, his body is offered to the fire. The substances that are offered with the body, butter, oil, sugar, and various grains, represent everything that is desirable, sustaining, and virtuous in this world. To complete this process, Palden Sering's possessions were donated to the monastery. The day after the cremation, the monks auctioned them off to the people of the village. Two days later, Palden Sering's sons carry his ashes up the mountain and leave them to the elements. Palden Sering, listen without distraction. The body which you had in this life is becoming indistinct to you, and the body you will have in your future life is becoming clear. As you sense this, you will become frightened and sad. There is no place for you to rest, and no stopping place in your ceaseless wandering. You do not care what your next life will bring as long as you will be born soon, and so you approach anything that appears before you. Take care, Palden Sering. Do not be afraid. Look for a good human birth, where you may yet recognize your own true nature. The 14th Dalai Lama now resides here in Dharamsala, India. He was born in 1935 and was recognized 5 years later as the incarnation of the previous Dalai Lama. As a young boy, he could recognize people who were familiar to his predecessor and select objects which he had used. After his formal recognition, he was rigorously trained and assumed full spiritual and temporal authority as leader of the Tibetan state in 1950 at the age of 15.
If you accept, if you believe, if you accept, you see, life, continuation of life, then death is just one occasion. Like you see, they're changing when your clothes become, old, and then you see, the old cloth, you see, throw away and take, you see, new, nice, you see, cloth. Similarly, this old body cannot function properly, then change the new body, more energetic, more fresh body.
Sokrapa was shot by an Indian policeman 11 years ago while participating in a demonstration for the improvement of labor conditions in Ladakh. 2,000 people from all over the country attended his funeral. Subsequently, the Indian government acceded to the demand for improved conditions, and Sokrapa became a national hero. We have confirmed that this boy is the reincarnation of the monk Sokrapa. All Ladakh is very happy. Sokrapa's incarnation, Zopa, is the youngest son of a poor farming family and was discovered in Sokrapa's own village. When he was born, he had a bruise on his side, which did not go away for a very long time. He said that he had been hit by a bullet and it hurt him. The bruise was on the same place where Sokrapa was shot. When Zopa was 2 years old, he said he wanted to meet his aunt. But the aunt he was referring to was Sokrapa's aunt, who had raised Sokrapa as a child and had lived with him. When he visited her, Zopa was able to identify all the objects which Sokrapa had regularly used. My nephew Sokrapa was a pure-hearted, virtuous person who always thought about other people. Because he was a good man, he has found a good rebirth. When Zopa was 8 years old, the village gathered funds to send him to be trained at Sera Monastery in Mysore, India. Sera, formerly a major monastery in Tibet, gives special attention to the traditions of debate, logic, and chanting Buddhist texts. The people of Ladakh hope that Zopa will one day return to his country as a future leader. On the final day of reading the Bardo Total, the entire family gathers to pray that Palden Sering will find a fortunate birth. Palden Sering, listen without distraction. You have not recognized your own nature, and now you will once again experience all the painful uncertainties of birth and death. Give up anger, give up attachment, and give up yearning for relatives and friends. Take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. With your head held high, enter the human realm. I am very happy that we have been able to offer all these prayers and this reading to help my father. We have done all that can be done for Palden Sering. And all the ceremonies and readings have been done properly. I feel that Palden Sering has found a human birth. But I don't know in what circumstances he may have been born. The Tibetan Book of the Dead presents the states of dying and after death as a continuous possibility. We can become frozen in our attachment and fear, or we can recognize the liberation of our true nature. The Tibetan Book of the Dead shows that this opportunity is available to us in every moment of life and death.
The heavy body of flesh and blood and bones, has within it this body of consciousness, this body of light. Becoming this body of light so that you can just dissolve into this sense of light. The solid body remains here, but you are becoming this pure light, dissolving into your heart, dissolving into your heart with each breath. Each time you breathe out, it's as if it were your last breath. Expanding into a larger and larger sense of spaciousness. Nothing to hold on to. Beyond the mind, beyond the body, floating free in space, totally safe. Any distraction dissolving back into the heart. Floating free. Nice?
You know any tapes of you talking like this together?
I don't have any tapes.
Oh,
No.
I'd love to play it a few times.
Something which difficult to handle. Now that, if you prepare that, you know it. Now, such is a time I will face the terrible situation, and knowing it, and prepare for it. Then when actually you see that happen, you already accepted, you already prepare for it. So much easier to handle.
And I accept that actually. And it's not like it's an awful thing, you see. And if you can get to that point, you face death a lot. Because it's just another thing along the way. And
sometimes I also have some kind of excited feeling towards death. Now, because in my daily prayer, they deal with the death process and the partu process and next life. So therefore, when I sometimes think about death, then I got some kind of excitement. Whether really I can utilize these practice fully at that moment or no.
Stangen's great-granddaughter, who was married into a family in a distant village, comes to visit him. Grandpa, how are you? Here's my son. The child is Stangen's great-great-grandchild. Stangen is very happy to have his family with him. Although he wants nothing further from his life, as he says, I am always grateful for what the path of life gives to me. Today, Buddhism no longer exists in many of the countries where once it flourished. Nonetheless, in those countries where it is still practiced, it is a source of guidance and strength. And it continues to express people's aspirations for the well-being of all.